Denmark.
Okay, so his name is, as I said, I think it's pronounced Farrell.
Mm-hmm.
He's from a channel called Board It. He posted up on Reddit the other day a video that was like his top five two-player games that are not strictly two-player games, right?
Yeah.
Interesting category.
Yeah. And I think a key thing as well is I imagine that Star Wars Rebellion and War of the Ring and that kind of thing wouldn't count because they're really two-player games.
Right.
Yeah,
that just
you can
happen
play as a team.
That's right. You happen to play as a team. So, like, some examples that were in his list were like Carnegie and like Circadian's Chaos Order and stuff, which I thought was like, reasonably heavy and reasonably recent games, which was a bit unusual. So I looked at his channel, and his channel reviews medium to heavy games pretty much all the time. And I was like, okay, that seems, reasonable. He seemed to have like a good number of viewers as well. And I was like, all right, well, I'll reach out to him. And he was super responsive and super polite, which is very different from some experiences I've had with a bunch of different. That? No, well, I don't. Obviously, I'm not going to name and shame. No. It's just
we have to blacklist them. Name names.
No. So it's just more like I can understand from the perspective of like I'm a nobody designer, right? No one's heard of me. I haven't really designed a game before, but I just wouldn't have thought it would be so hard to reach out to so many different content creators. Some of them just kind of say no up front, and that's fine. There were a few that kind of said, no, we don't do a certain type of game. And then you look at their channel and they do. But that might have just been them, fulfilling previous commitments. Like maybe they don't do them anymore. But they had a backlog of them, right? That was what someone else had explained to me, which that does seem fair enough. But the main thing was just people who would respond and then like kind of ghosts in a way. Like they go, yeah, I'm interested. And I go, okay, great. What do you need? And like send through the rule book, and I'd send it through and then nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that's frustrating.
Yeah. And then it's like, I'm like, did this rulebook scare you away or something like that? Like, and I'd even send like 1 or 2 follow-up emails and go, hey, just checking in. I sent this on this date. Are you around? And then I'd send another one going, hey, if you're not interested, that's fine. Can you just let me know? So that way I don't have like a copy tied up just in case I need to send it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that happened more than once.
See, it sounds like dating. Like you're like, is it me? You say hello.
Yeah.
Just text me back.
Yes,
please.
I'm interested.
Yeah. That's what I mean. They did. They swiped. What is it? Swiped right, and then they were like, we had a conversation for a little bit. Everything seemed good, and it was like, all right, do you want to meet up? And it was nothing.
A ghost.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was. It's frustrating, right? I don't necessarily take it as disheartening. I understand that people are busy and all of that kind of stuff, but it's just more. I'd almost rather they just say no in the first place.
Yeah, because sure. Say, hey, I'm super busy. Or just say, I'm super busy. I'm interested. If you don't hear from me, it's because I am super busy.
Yeah, exactly. Just give me something, right? Rather than going, I'm interested, please send me this thing, and then not follow up at all.
So you show up for the date and nobody sits down. You're just sitting there at the table waiting to order.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you send them? Did you see them on the? Did they see your video feed? Because like those are board games in your that would scare me away. What's happening behind you right now? The board games in the
this.
Look at them! Look at them! What is happening there?
They're like that. So in fairness, that's not how they normally sit.
I would hope not, because that's terrifying.
That's my spare cupboard of stuff. My actual board game shelf is shut behind us. That's more like I've got like Mythic Battles Pantheon big empty boxes basically. And I had to take a scrap prototype out. So the scrap prototypes are actually at the bottom, which you can't see. And then when I pulled them out, it turns out they were slightly weight bearing. So then Mythic Battles slid a little bit. But the Mythic Battles box is absolutely empty, right? So there's nothing in it. It's just a box.
All right, that's fine.
I would assume there's dead cats in there. Dead cats. Like hoarder
dead cats under the boxes.
Lots of dead cats. Yeah.
I don't hate cats.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, no. Like hoarders always have extra cats. And that looks like a hoarder situation. You have extra cats you don't know about.
I feel like if it was a hoarder situation, I'd have much more stuff. It's probably a good thing.
No, that's right. I don't think... It doesn't look to me like a hoarder situation. It just looks like you don't respect
To clarify, as I said, I would love to go over and open. I mean, that's like my linen and stuff.
Okay.
But the other side of my cupboard has my actual board game shelves, which are nice and neatly stacked. Probably nicer than the rest of my room.
Believe you. It's fine.
I don't think you do.
I do.
Extra cats. Extra cats. That's all I got to say. So,
yeah.
I would say that a lot of people don't understand that the majority of business is going to be dealt with partnerships and friendships. Like, I've found that, like, real friends are there, like, to the end. Like, they don't even like your game, but they become friends with you, and you become just engaged as, you know, just friendly relationships. Those are the things that carry on from game to game. Whatever you design, doesn't even matter. They just like you as a person. You're basically selling yourself. And a lot of content creators are new, or they're in it to sell advertising or whatever they're doing. They don't see that it's all about relationships. It really is. Like, some of the people that I met at the very beginning of the hobby when I started going to cons are the same people I still talk to. And we don't like the same kind of games. We're not into hanging out with the same kind of people or anything like that, but we're still good friends, and we still, like, if they produce something, I want to know about it, and I talk about it, and vice versa. So I think it's just trying to find the right people.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
like the theme. It's like the theme of the board game industry at the moment. There's too many. There's probably, you know, arguably just too many games. There's so many games out there, and you don't know what you want to play, and it's just overwhelming. And it's the same with content creators. There's too many of them. You know, that no one knows what they want to do yet. Like, majority of them, I don't think have found their niche. Like you said, KP, they might be discovering that as they go. They might be like, oh, these are actually my kind of games. I only want games in that. That's a good sign. I think they need to do more of that, you know, because it's like we were saying last time. It's not really that fair for someone to review something that's not in their wheelhouse and they don't know anything about those kind of games.
Yes, absolutely.
It's better that, you know, like if I was to review a war game, oh my gosh, like that would be not great.
You were going to say, Mo?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think it really is just new versus old. Like, when there were fewer people,
I'd probably just be like, this is amazing. Everything else is
she did some weird audio stuff.
That was some weird audio
I
stuff.
totally cut out and I was just talking, and I don't know if you picked up on it.
Okay,
go for it. I know that you were talking. No. I don't know where I was at, so I've got no idea. What were you saying?
Chipmunk rubbish.
You continue, bro.
Okay, so it really is, like, I don't think it's necessarily the content type. It really is just relationships, I think. I think in the end, it's going to boil down to that. You can try to, like, select for certain people to only be on your channel. Yeah, that's going to be great. But in the end, all that's going to be kind of modular, like what you take in, what you change, how you feel about things and all that. But I've just found that, like, really relationships are what it's like. I don't know. It's like take Berkey. He loves light games. He makes his game tables. We're great friends, but we won't sit at a game table together to play anything because, I mean, we just don't like the same thing. But, you know. But
But that's a weird thing to say, actually, that it's about relationships, because you don't want to have relationships really with them. You need a barrier. You need them to be able to do an honest review. If you'd have close relationships with reviewers, then they're going to be, like you said, you're selling yourself, and then that's not really giving a fair review. There's too much bias there.
It's tricky because, you know, I think that if you're like a reviewer really worth your stock and that kind of thing, you should be able to overcome that bias and kind of go, it doesn't matter that I don't like this particular thing. Like, it's not, you know, it's not an indictment on our relationship or anything like that. It's just, I don't like this particular game, and that's okay. You know what I mean? And it should be a good thing, I guess, in that way, that I would be able to review it, or not I, but, you know, someone would be able to review the game, even if it was from someone that they knew, and say, this is good or this is bad. I think it's just that honesty, but also, like, the honesty is really important, right? Like, being able to review in as objective a way as possible.
Yeah.
Reviews are inherently reviews are subjective, right? But you can still clearly come across as someone who's just like, my friend is awesome versus not. I mean, I'm fortunate in that most of my gaming group from Sydney are not big fans of area control games. So when I was designing Scrap, most of the time they were like, don't really want to play this, or like, don't really like it. So if anything, that was good, because it just meant that like they weren't going, this is the best thing ever. Like when they actually did give you positive feedback, it meant more in that way.
Yeah, but the other way to look at it, though, is you really have to ask yourself, how much influence do reviewers have on the industry and how many games are coming out? So if a guy comes out and says, well, so-and-so is my friend, but I really like his game, and then they're honest about the review, or they say, let's just say they praise your review. Unless it's like Tom Vassell, there's not a whole lot of sway. And in the sway that they have, there's so much content being made that you really have to wonder what kind of a ripple this really makes. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
I think
go for it.
When I think of like reviewers and that kind of thing, I think for me, it's not so much it's not always the content of what they say. I mean, I will be interested in what they think of it personally, but I don't necessarily think that if they say this is the best game ever or anything like that, it's going to have a tremendous sway on absolutely everyone. Because most of the time when I read what people say about reviewers, it's not always someone going, oh, this reviewer said it was good, so I, went and bought the game. Often it's, I watched a review of the game, I learned how to play it from the review, and then I went, right, this seems like the kind of game for me. Whether or not the review themselves actually said something good. For me, reviewers are more just around getting the word out, basically. So it's just getting the product in front of more people's eyes and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
I'm always curious, as I said, what they say, and I respect them going through the process of playing the game and reviewing it, because I always like to hear about my game, but the review itself is almost more for me rather than for other people
needing the critique.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy the critique. I'm sure that there are some people out there who are certainly swayed by opinions one way or another. I mean, like there are some reviewers who I put a little bit more stock in than others, and one of them is actually, you guys probably know ProZD, right?
Yeah.
So ProZD
the one that does the hilarious videos, babe. Eternal New or whatever
the cow one. The cow one.
Yeah, the cow one. That's right. So I mean, he's a pretty non-traditional board game reviewer, right? Mm-hmm. But I find he's fairly no nonsense and fairly straight about most of the things that he reviews. So I put a lot of stock into the things that he does say. Now, he has led me astray once or twice, but he did also lead me to Sniper Elite recently, which I think is really good. So, it's just sometimes there is some level of sway from what people say, but it really does depend on the reviewer as well. Like some reviewers are just super, super biased and they acknowledge their biases, and that's fine. Like if I were to review a game, oftentimes I'm not a big fan of, heavy open information Euro games. And so naturally, if I get a really heavy entirely open information Euro game, I'm not always going to enjoy that as much as something that has a little more uncertainty or that kind of thing. And I think as long as reviewers acknowledge where their own personal biases may come from, I don't think their reviews are any less valid. But it just might mean that particular people may be more or less swayed by them in that way.
Yeah, it takes 2 failures. If you fail twice, if you review a game that I find horrible twice, that's it. You're done.
That's it. You're out.
That's it. You're out. I'm not going to look at your stuff anymore.
You don't know if you do a positive review of that game that you don't like.
That poop game? Yeah. If you give me a poop game that you say is amazing, then I think you can't smell poop.
That's fair.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. There are certain people that, like, if they said you should play this game, that I would play it. I would go out of my way just to play it. It's probably like you two of them, I think.
Well, like, what if I said, so-and-so is my friend, you should probably play this game, but I might be biased. What are you going to think then?
If you said that?
Yeah, if I said, so-and-so is my
I'd still
friend.
probably try it. You're pretty brutal. I think you're pretty honest. I think I'd trust you that you still liked it.
Same question, KP.
So
KP?
if you said your friend had a game,
or Sarah comes to you and says, I've got a game you should try, but I'm kind of biased because whatever.
It's like because of whatever reason. I'd probably try it, but that's more my curiosity around things anyway, right? Like,
it's not about the fact that you trust my taste. It's more a curiosity thing.
Yeah, exactly. No. It's like, it's whatever, right? Like,
I take back what I said.
I'm always curious to try new games and see what people are doing with, mechanics and that kind of thing. Like, I think being a game designer, a lot of what you do in the industry is you play test other people's games too. That's like half your job is going around and playing other designers' games.
The
because
worst part, man. The worst part.
no, I think it's a mixed part, right? Like I won't beat around the bush. I'll say that there are some times where I'll play a game and I'll think, oh my goodness, like, you know, I do wish that I wasn't doing this right now. But there are other times where I play a game and I'm really pleasantly surprised. I always plug this particular one as a very positive one. But there's a game by a guy called Mark McKinnon, which is called Wardens of Wolvengard. I'm not a big fan of the name. It's fairly, you know, fantasy.
Say that.
Exactly. Fantasy of some location, whatever. But it's a boss battler. And boss battlers are a genre that I really like, theoretically. But I feel like every boss battle I've played, I've hated. Except that one. That one feels like it does it really well. And I think the mechanics in it are really inspired and really cool. So I enjoyed playing that because, you know, it really opened my eyes to different things. So that I find useful, even if a game is not like super polished, which I would say that I think the first time I played it, it wasn't like super duper polished, but it was enough to get the game through and get the core concepts across. I think those are really valuable. But I think sometimes it's like when someone's had an idea for 3 weeks and then their game is already ready for publishing, that's generally the playtests that I start to regret. And I generally don't find that out until the very end of the playtest, where I go, oh, okay, you know, whereabouts are you in your journey with this game design? Because if someone comes and they say, oh, I'm very, very early design, this is just some base concepts, whatever, right? You know, we can work from there. But I've had people go, oh, you know, it's ready for publishing. Basically, I'm going to pitch it soon. I'm like, okay, like we are not the same. Like we are in very different stages of where we think we are in the design journey, and also what we understand, I suppose, about game design. Not to toot my own horn or anything like that, but just more, I think there's some level of understanding which is not everyone has.
Well, because you've been through the process before, I guess, and they
kind of like haven't. A little.
I mean,
bit.
Not to this degree, not self-publishing, but you.
No. But I do. Yeah, I have had a design technically published, at least a base. Like it was, it probably could have been more thoroughly developed, but it did. You know, that process did happen, and I've been privy to the behind the scenes of stuff. My parents work in the industry as well. I have a lot of friends who work in the industry. So, like, I get the behind-the-scenes working of most of the stuff. And so I get it takes a long time. I get you need to develop. I get all of that level of stuff. And I know that generally 4 weeks into a design, if you're ready to publish, it's a pretty big red flag.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I've got a question, something that Mo brought up a little while ago, and it was about like playtesters.
I brought it up. It must be good.
Yeah, it's a good question because it's your question.
Is this bias?
What a big head.
I'm amazing. What are you talking about?
About playtesters, yeah.
About playtesters trying to design over you, or like even suggest design things you should do. You know, like the game's this, and I'm probably guilty of this. I might even be guilty of this with Scrub. I don't even know. But people like saying, oh, you should do it this way, or instead of just giving you feedback.
Yeah, so is the question, how do I feel about that?
How do you feel about it? Yeah.
I don't like it. I would say that generally speaking, like when I get feedback, I take all feedback is appreciated, but not all feedback is equal, right? I appreciate people taking the time to think about it, play the game, you know, and even when they give me suggestions, even if it's things I don't necessarily want to hear or any of that, I'm always appreciative of the fact that they've given up their time to do so, and they're giving up energy to, you know, actually engage with the design process. But I guess what I find more helpful feedback is if people say, have you considered this particular thing? Rather than saying you should do X. Because the thing is that when someone comes into a design and says you should do X, I guess they're often coming... I don't know if they always come from it from the perspective of, you know, actually this person's probably spent thousands of hours designing this game. They know it much better than I do in the first hour and a half that I just spent playing it. So when they say, you know, you should do this or whatever, you know, I don't think they always have that considered. I had it recently. I won't get too specific, but I had someone finish playing the game, and they said, this is all, like, you know, this is really good. I really enjoyed the time. The only thing you need to change this thing. And I remember, like, just my instant response was, no, I don't. Like, it's not.
Nope.
Like, no,
Noping that.
that's not how it works. You know, again, I've had to think through and play test hundreds of times and play, you know, design for thousands of hours to get it to this point. I understand why the systems work this way and all of that. And that's not to say that the systems can't change all the time. Like, things can change, and sometimes there are little insights that come up here or there. But I think very, very rarely has it been the case that someone has said, you need to change this particular thing.
Yeah.
And they have instantly been right, except in very early design. But generally, when in very early design, I already know. Like, by the time they've said that, it's already very clear from the playtest that something needs to change.
Yeah.
Rather than it being some galaxy brain level insight, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess.
really... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, is it better to just say, I played it and I felt this way about it, and this particular thing I didn't really like very much? Or is it better to say, oh, I think you should try and add this mechanism or change this mechanism? Or, like, I'm thinking Mo was saying that A is
much better. Much, much better. Because the thing is that, like, if you start going for B, you're basically making a lot of assumptions around what I'm trying to get at with the game, right? Like, you're basically saying, I know what you're trying to achieve, and these are the things you need to do to try and achieve it. Like, here's a hypothetical example. Say that my intention with the game is to make you feel stressed and annoyed. And at the end of the game, the person says, I really didn't like this game. Throughout the game, it was really stressful, and I really didn't like this particular thing. Then design goal-wise, it's actually nailing it, right?
Yes, nailed it.
Yeah, exactly. So then if instead they say, you need to change this thing because I think I want the game to go a little bit longer, and, you know, I want this thing and that thing, then you're kind of telling me what you think the design goals of the game should be when it's not. Now, I'm not designing a game to intentionally be annoying or anything like that. But an example, I was once told that I should take the programming mechanism out of Scrap because it felt hard. It felt bad when I flipped up a card and I didn't know what my opponent was going to do. And I wanted to be able to pick my action on my turn. And when they said you should do that, it was just completely missing the mark around what the game is designed to do. Because the game is designed to have that uncertainty, to have it so that you're not picking your perfect move. So when they made the suggestion and said you need to change it like this, it's completely missing the design intent. Whereas if they said, I felt frustrated sometimes because I couldn't do the exact thing I wanted to on my turn, that's actually much more useful feedback because that tells me spot on, bingo, it's actually doing what it needs to. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the best practices is to ask the designer, what do you want from me? I played your game,
absolutely.
what do you want from me? And if they don't know, well, then you can just kind of shoot in the dark and just start saying a bunch of crap. But usually they have a specific thing they're trying to test or a question they have. Did you feel this or whatever?
JP does it like an interview.
Oh, yeah. I remember JP's interview.
Totally. Oh, yeah. I mean, I go through and I ask all these different... Because there's very specific things that I'm looking for, right? At pretty much every stage I'm playtesting. I mean, initially, my first question often is, like, were you engaged with the game, right? It's not were you having fun, it's were you engaged, right? Were you thinking through things? Because fun is so subjective, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's like you in that way, Mo. He doesn't want people to have fun.
I do want people to have fun. I mean, I put so many things in my game so people have, you know, exciting big moments and that kind of thing. And, you know, there's nice art. Well, I think it's nice. And fun components and everything so that people have fun. But
I hope you're not having a go at me. Like, was that a side dig at me about the art? Because I do like the art. I really do like the art. I don't like the box cover. I just don't.
Wait. Oh, no. That wasn't a side dig at you. I was like, hang on. Yeah. No. No. The box cover's come up a few times. I'm reviewing the box cover, so don't worry about that. But no, I was saying that
your box cover's trash. That's what she said.
I didn't say it's trash.
That's what she said.
That's okay. Look, as I said, I've gotten reviews from different people, and art is always subjective, right? Like, I like it, but I can understand why people don't. And some people do like it, some people don't. Some people think it's awful, some people think it's great. And that's all right. I'd rather go for something that's kind of more, in a way, for the art, at least. I'd rather go for something that's kind of more broadly appealing rather than polarizing. I don't mind polarizing mechanics in that way, right? Because I think mechanics that are polarizing are interesting, at least, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas art's very different. I think on a broad level, polarizing art is interesting, right? But on a I'm trying to make a product which people engage with level, I think, you know, more balanced, wider appealing art is probably what I go for. So I try and go for the things that are kind of minimally offensive in that way. So as long as it's not offensive to your sensibilities, then I think it's okay. But if more, because I've had a few people mention, you know, the box cover is like not their cup of tea or that kind of thing, then yeah. I think ultimately, if I was looking at things like having the board game on the shelf and that kind of thing more, then yeah, the box cover would be more of a consideration. It was something that came up. I feel like this is derailed from the main question, but that's okay.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
don't like to be on rails.
Yeah, yeah. The one of the things I was told recently was that I needed to put my game into a bigger box, basically, because it was too pricey to be in a standard 30 by 30 box. Too pricey, by the way, is actually, I would say that's inaccurate. It's about the same price as a lot of games, or at least the price I'm offering it for on Kickstarter is a similar price to other games, higher end games, admittedly, that are in the same standard size box. Like, I think I went into a local game store recently and like Spirit Island's like $140 in like a standard size box. And, you know, Scrap's Kickstarter is lower than that. So I think it's within the realms of normal. But even so, when they were telling me, you know, you need to put it in a bigger box, it's the kind of thing like, again, why? Because the intention is to sell it on Kickstarter, right? At the moment, or not Kickstarter, GameFound. And if it's on GameFound, it's not like you're going to be going, oh, that box looks too small. Like, you know, you're looking at the game and the product. If anything, if I got a game from GameFound, did something happen?
Yeah, we had some.
I blinked.
When she comes back, it'll fix. Hopefully, when she gets back in.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna mess with it.
Yeah, that's fine.
There we go.
I already am back. I'm like, I am back. I'm here. Can't see.
I'll quickly continue my point, which was like if I ordered a game from GameFound or from Kickstarter or something, and it looked like a massive game, and then it arrived and it was in like a smaller box, but all the stuff was there. Like they didn't cut any components or anything. Like all the stuff I expected to be there is there. I'd be more delighted than anything. I'd rather have a smaller box. Yeah. And Scrap is a pretty tight fitting game at the moment. Like it fits in that 30 by 30 box, but it's tight. Like it's very, if you added any more content, you'd start to really push it.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Sarah's video.
It blinked out for a sec, but she's back at the moment.
Okay, so I don't know why she keeps blinking in and out of her video.
I don't know either.
Oh no.
I don't know.
Okay, well yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like, it's so after the fact, it would be a retail issue. It's really a retail issue.
That's right, and I think that's the thing as well is something I've been talking about so much because I've had a few conversations with a few different people, and I think a lot of the time, again, it's kind of like. It's in a way, it's similar to playtester feedback that I don't find useful in the sense that when you make an assumption about the product, when you haven't asked me what the intention is or anything like that, right? So an example is someone will make a comment about what something should be made of or what the price should be or what quantities I should be going for or that kind of thing. When I guess the thought is that their perspective is my intention is to sell as many copies as possible. Which is not incorrect. Obviously, I would love to sell as many copies of the game as possible, but I'm not trying to make my game... I'm not necessarily trying to go for retail, right? I'm just trying to get my game published and have people interested in it, and that'll be fine, right? I'm not aiming for 10,000 copies as a retail game. I'm aiming for, can I get the game manufactured? And then some. You know what I mean? Right. It's kind of like GMT in that way. GMT are not really a retail company, right? Some of their games do make it into retail, but for the most part, they sell through their P250s and P500s, and then they sell directly from their website. And that's almost more of the model that I'm going for, is smaller production ones, because it's likely that my games will not always be as widely appealing. Like, you know... It mechanically, I've tried to go things that are unique and really fulfilling, but they may not always be everyone's cup of tea. And in addition, it is a little bit more of a boutique product because the componentry is quite fancy, right? Like, kind of like Splotter in a way, right? somewhat polarizing games from a relatively small publisher. And it just means that their prices are generally higher because their quantities are lower. And that's kind of the space that I find myself working in. And I'm okay with that. I'm not necessarily aiming to do 10,000 copies into retail. And so sometimes when I get advice around that, it's not particularly useful. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So I don't know what Sarah's video thing was doing in and out.
I know. I have had a bit of a weird internet thing.
Oh, is that
okay.
it?
It's
Was
hot
that what
today.
it is?
Yeah.
Okay. So, they generally at this point they would ask, give us some of your history or whatever. I hate that question. So
Sure.
instead of that, let me guess. You started off in Yu-Gi-Oh. Or was
You're
it
really
Pokemon?
close. You're really close.
Really?
Yeah. So
How do you not know this story anyway? Or maybe you do know it, but you
I
just want
don't
it.
think I know it.
Oh,
Yeah, you're really close. So I mean,
Well, I know Cthulhu Wars, but I'm thinking pre-Cthulhu Wars. I'm thinking card games. I'm thinking going to a local shop and playing either Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh. You don't come off as Magic.
Yeah. So funnily enough. Oh, interesting. Okay,
That's
so
funny.
let me give you my quick history. Yeah. So when I was like 5, I got my first card, which was I think it was 1998 Poke Tour, which was a Pikachu. So that was when the Pokemon card game had just come out. I also had my first experience of being ripped off because we went to our local, they sold them through like video game shops at the time, so we'd go in there. We bought Pokemon cards. We got like some rare card. Someone traded us a whole bunch of commons for it. Yeah. We were kids.
Yep.
We were like, hell yeah, we'll take all of these. But that was kind of my first touches of trading cards. The first game I played properly was Yu-Gi-Oh. So I got into Yu-Gi-Oh. That was what led me to the game store. I played my first tournament. I actually did transition from Yu-Gi-Oh. So I went from Yu-Gi-Oh to Duel Masters to Magic, as it turns out, which was Wizards' plan all along with Duel Masters, was to get the Yu-Gi-Oh kids to transition to Magic.
Right. And you got to suck it in. You fell for it.
I did, yeah. I played Magic for a little bit. And then I dropped off for a bit. And then in high school, probably around year 7 or year 8, I just felt like, I was like, you know what? I actually kind of want to go play Magic again. Oh, there's the one I'm missing, sorry. Star Wars Miniatures was actually a big deal for me too. Yeah. So the Wizards of the Coast tabletop game. So I played that for a while. I was number 2 ranked in Australia, which was fun. But then I played more Magic more seriously. That was pretty much me all throughout high school, was actually Magic. I got on the Pro Tour once, which was fun. I had a few money finishes at some Grand Prix, nothing ever major. And all throughout that time, because I was attending the game stores, I started getting more into board games. So board games started with Settlers, pretty natural. And then from there, I think the game that I said always really solidified everything for me is Agricola. When I played that for the first time, I thought, this is magnificent. And we played it so much. But Power Grid was another one early on that was really big for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is, again, funny because I always talk about how I don't enjoy big,
open
heavy,
information.
open information Euros, right? But they were the ones that initially got me hooked into the games, right? It's just that more my tastes have evolved nowadays. But I've been gaming, properly. I always say, I've been properly board gaming and stuff for 19 years now. So,
did you say evolved or devolved? I think you said devolved.
I might have said devolved. But I've come to enjoy different types of games more. And it's not, I play heaps of, open information heavy Euro games as well. I played Clans of Caledonia recently, which I actually quite liked. I liked it more than I thought I would, given what it is. So that was kind of cool. I think I enjoyed the slaughtering sheep mechanism. I liked that you could slaughter a sheep and then rebuild on the same space and then buy more stuff and kind of wombo combo that. That was really interesting.
That's messed up. That was your favorite part.
Yeah. As I said,
I love the slaughtering of the sheep.
It was great. It was the best mechanism by far. Was killing the animals, right?
I didn't remember doing that in Clans.
Well, you didn't do it right then.
Obviously not.
But anyway, that's that I thought was interesting, right? And yeah, so 19 years of gaming, started off with Yu-Gi-Oh. You were correct. Yeah, and that's where I am now. But I've played all kinds of stuff.
You should probably take it as a compliment that he didn't think you were into Magic. Maybe he thinks you're just not nerdy enough for Magic.
No. It has to do with age and introduction. When I was young, there was no Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon. I can't say that I would have been or not into it. I don't know. All there was Magic. So it's just the age groups and what's inviting and what's in. When I got into Magic, there was nothing. So it was just Magic. Oh no, she's gone again.
That's okay.
Yeah, she'll be back. There it is.
But yes, I know what you mean, because there were no choices other than Magic. And then whereas in my age group, that was where I'm literally the prime age where Yu-Gi-Oh was targeted at me.
Yeah.
Right. So it makes sense. Yeah. And it worked. Right. Yu-Gi-Oh. I did like the TV show. I did get into the card game. And it was what probably triggered all my board gaming stuff, because that was what brought me into a game store.
Right.
Whereas before that, I was just playing like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh in the schoolyard, basically.
Right.
But yeah, so Yu-Gi-Oh was really that first venture into a hobbyist game store.
So I guess you mentioned Catan. Are you one of those people who, like somebody here, who talks badly about Catan, yet
it goes for a really long time? Insane.
Yet they talk about not being like inviting to new people. I mean, Catan's the perfect game for the invitation of new people.
Yes.
Why is it? No, it's not.
So many people say, like, we don't want gatekeepers, blah, blah, blah. And then they start hating directly on Catan or Monopoly or whatever. And those are some of the first introductions we have into board gaming for a lot of people.
It doesn't have to be, though. Like,
yes,
that could turn people off real bad. I feel like Catan could turn people off real bad. It's like that randomness. It takes too long. Anyway, I don't want to...
The thing is, I guess I'm of two minds, right? So I would say that I don't think Catan has to be the initial foray. Like, there are some people who will play something completely different. They could play something... I think a few of my friends who had never played board games before, their initial foray into board gaming was me teaching them One Night Ultimate Werewolf, right? So I guess it's not prescriptively that they have to be, but I think one of the key draws for a lot of people into board gaming is actually things like Take That, which is generally hated by a lot of people in the board game industry. But part of the fun, like why people like Monopoly, is, haha, I take your rent. Or like, I'm taking your money. And Catan is similar. The fun part of Catan is like putting the robber down and stealing someone's card. People like that, right? And so there's a lot of people who, if they're making the transition from more mainstream board games like Monopoly, which do have those Take That elements, Catan still has that. It also introduces some more we'd consider traditional modern board game elements as well. Like building up economy and all of that kind of stuff and trading. And I suppose that's another thing as well, is the trading mechanism. Like Catan is more interactive than a lot of games are, because you're stealing from people and you're trading. So, like, is it my favorite game now? No, I probably wouldn't go out and actively seek to play it very often. But if someone said, what do you think a good gateway game is? Catan would be one of them. Like, it does do its purpose.
For some people. I'm just saying that, like, last time we spoke, which is only a few days ago, we talked about this. Like, everyone's tastes are different, so you can't just go, this is a great gateway game for all the noobs. It's like, well, all of the noobs have different personalities and like different things. So it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's different. There's a whole bunch of different games I think would be appropriate for gateways, right? And in the same way, you're right in that it totally depends on the person. Because, for example, one thing I'm doing when I return to Sydney is a few of my friends who only play video games, I'm going to be teaching Scrap to. And they don't really play board games. Scrap is pretty heavy, like it's mid-heavyweight. Mm-hmm. And so you wouldn't think of it as like a first foray into games, bang, Scrap, here we go. But they play like MOBAs and they play like RTSs and stuff. So they're used to really heavy thinking around gaming and stuff. So I don't think the transition into a heavier board game will be as hard for them. Whereas I think often when people are talking about gateway games, they're thinking of this kind of stock standard, average Joe, or average Jane person who doesn't have any predisposition to gaming whatsoever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So no video games, no anything. So it's like, how do you take someone from a fairly blank slate and then introduce them into board gaming? And even so, like, there are a few different games I think that are appropriate, like that can serve that purpose, and there's a few that are not. But I suppose the range of games that can be appropriate board gateways is quite large, because there's a lot of different games you could show someone for the first time and they'd be okay.
Yeah, and like you were saying with the video gamers, moving from, you know, what they're playing online to your video game, there's a lot of stuff that they're probably going to like there. So I think that's a good move.
Yeah,
because it's
hopefully.
definitely not. It's not like people are stupid. It's not like they can't learn rules. It's the
No,
desire to learn the
stupid.
rules.
They don't know shit.
It's their desire to learn the rules because there's something there that they actually are interested in.
It's a funny thing, right? Because it certainly is. There are levels of it, right? But one thing I've noticed over my years, I'm the resident rules teacher in our group, right? So, I mean, in fairness, in Canberra, because I go to a few different groups, there's a lot of fairly heavy gamers in those groups, so we do alternate teachers. But when I think about my Sydney group specifically, I'm almost always the teacher. But I think one of the key things with board gaming generally is that you need to build comprehension over a long time. So in order to be like a really competent teacher, you actually need to be able to like read a rule book and create a mental model around what's happening. And if you can't do that, then teaching is going to be a real struggle. And that's why you get those people who, when they're teaching, they'll just read from the rule book, is because they actually can't imagine what's happening with the game. And the only way to really build that comprehension up is being exposed to concepts over time, right? Because it'd be like me reading a manual for any topic that I have no idea about. I might be able to read the words. This is the speech pathologist in me coming out. But I might be able to read the words and like understand them on a literal level. But in context, it's much more challenging. So it's not that people aren't stupid. It's not that people are stupid. It's that
Mo's like, you got it right.
It's not that people are stupid, but they lack the concept knowledge in the board gaming space in that way, right? And so I think a lot of different gateway games do a good thing in that they introduce those concepts without requiring everything else. Because, as an example, if you think about a game nowadays, I could say, hey, there's this new game coming out, which is a heavy Euro game with a deck building element. And I don't have to explain any of that to you. You guys already have an idea in your head around what that's going to look like, right?
Yeah.
There's probably going to be money, resource management, and there's going to be cards and a deck that you shuffle and, deal with over time. But Dominion or something like that would be what I would consider a good gateway game, because it's introducing a really key mechanism in the board gaming space, like deck building, without any extraneous mechanisms, right? So, yeah.
Okay, so before we go much further, you should probably plug when your not Kickstarter, your Game Found thing.
Game Found.
Yeah, because if you don't do it now, we might not get a chance before we end it. So
no, that's fine. So obviously, I'm designing a game called Scrap. You might have heard me mention it already today. Scrap is coming to Game Found on the 19th of January in Australia time. So it's probably the 18th for most of the world, but 19th for us. It's asymmetric. It's got area, majority, and control elements. It's got a programming mechanism and hand management. It's got a lot of, again, I'm going to sound biased, but it's got a lot of what I think is fairly cool stuff in it. And it's got heat stamped wood and meeple, which I think look pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. I do like meeples.
Can
you call them meeples?
Yeah, I generally call them I just call them meeple, because they're wooden components representing, the main thing that you are using, right?
Yeah.
So whatever that might be, because I
was complaining about that, by the way. We were playing it. Of course, you asked me to only bring up the negative, but it was like
I hate the box art.
Yeah, I don't like the box art. Another thing I want to complain about. No, there was I got confused. I was like, "What's intelligences?" And May's like, "Robots," because they're called bots and intelligences.
So not quite. Bots are the individual units. Intelligences are them as a collective.
As the race.
Yes, that's correct. So an intelligence is your faction, effectively.
Okay.
Bot is the individual unit in a faction.
Right.
We
you
tossed
made up
up
too many fancy words, KP. That's the problem. You need basic words for me. I was overwhelmed.
Species had the same problem when you had it was introduced back in the idea of back in El Grande days when you had the Hof, or basically the province or the provinza, that the general supply and in your supply, and then individual dudes and then El Grande. So it was introduced back in area control way back in the day.
Yeah,
had the same problem. But
and then you went, wait, which one's the province? Is this the province? What's it?
I thought when you were talking about dominant species there, I thought you were going to mention the I actually thought you were going to mention dominance versus domination cards.
Yeah.
There's that. And because the tricky thing in dominant species, right, is that you can be dominant in an area, but then when you take the dominate action, it's not about dominance. It's about just area control, which I think is a little confusing. I would say that what Scrap runs into, it's tricky, right? Because I think in order to really create a narrative and evoke a sense of place and theme, it is important to use terminology that relates to your game. But at the same time, you might run into the netrunner problem, where you've got your R&D and your HQ and your archive. And if you ask someone, have you played Netrunner, Sarah?
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys know what all three of them are?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, so
I know the vocab. I call them completely something different while I'm playing.
Yeah.
You just call it whatever you want.
Do you call them hand, deck, and discard pile?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So I think there's an extent, right? I think if your verbiage starts getting in the way, or your game's vocabulary starts actively getting in the way of the teacher understanding everything, I think that's a problem. That's why, I don't go ahead and I don't call your hand something different. I don't call the cards are called functions, but I just still call them function cards, right? I've tried to make it so that there is some sense of flavor, right? You get what the world is about. The theme is kind of all through all of the stuff, but there is still enough there for people to grok onto. I mean, bots is pretty easy. Intelligence, as I concede, is one of the harder ones. I considered going for factions. I actually debated on what to call the factions for such a long time. I was like, do I call them? I think I called them lines for a while, like a line of bots. But that was when the theme was a little bit different. And then we went on to clans, but clans doesn't quite feel right for bots. And then that was when we landed on intelligences, because in the end, they're kind of like AI, but they're not anymore, is the theme. So intelligence is where we landed.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I guess I kind of find it funny, and I guess it sort of turns me off a little bit if a game is trying to deny that it's a game. So I'm glad that you don't do that. It's like, these are cards. These are function cards. This is still a game. Some people try and change all their wording so that you're so immersed in it that it's not a game anymore. It's like,
I think there is a level, though. I think it is, because it's something I've considered a few times when I've been wording my cards, right? There was one effect that basically removed something from the game. And then I kind of pondered, do I want to say it removes it from the game, or should I just say it destroys it? And then, let people intuit what that's going to mean, because it's basically going to mean it removes it from the game. But the moment you do say it removes it from the game, you do have that magic circle break, and you go, oh, right, we are actually playing a game. Sorry, you go.
I would also say that this is the Phil Eklund problem. Have you ever played any of his games?
Funnily enough, I got someone was giving away games in Queensland, and they were all brand new. And two of the games I asked for were Phil Eklund games: BIOS Megafauna and PAX Transhumanity.
Yeah, and the problem with his games are not the games themselves. They're easy to learn. They're very easy to play. In fact, they're very random and not hardcore Euro open information games. But the rule books are just like scientific dissertations of it's just it's impossible to get through.
Yeah, I think that's a problem, right? And that's why generally, so when you bring up the term intelligence, you probably hopefully only encountered that in the rulebook, right? Because there's no actual game elements that mention intelligences. I could have said, choose another intelligence, and that would have been the stand-in for another player. But I just said, choose an enemy player, choose an opposing player. just to make
that's good. That's really good.
Yeah, just to make it so that the cards are easy enough to interpret. If there's something that's being referred to within the game, like a bot or something, yeah, I call it a bot. And I call it, I call the things what they are: bots, artifacts, etc. But I don't try and obscure something when it to make it more challenging. I think calling players intelligences would have been more challenging. Whereas bots, artifacts, and stuff do refer to specific components which you have to learn about anyway. So because they have to be explicitly taught as part of the game, it's fine. Whereas, I think Sarah might be talking. I saw her saying something.
I don't know if she's talking to us or to.
No, I wasn't.
Okay, all good. Like with players, right? We already understand what a player is. I think this might be what it is. Actually, I've had a revelation. Right?
This is what we like.
Come to Jesus.
So it's when you come to the table, you have preconceived notions around what certain things are, right? Your hand, your deck, you're a player, right? Those things are kind of fundamental across games. But when you come to a new game, it's going to have new resources, new components and stuff that you can look at them and go, okay, I get that that's like a black cube or whatever, but what actually is it? All that kind of thing. So there are certain things that you have to teach as part of a game, right? Like new components and that kind of thing. All of that stuff in Scrap has specific names: artifacts, bots, etc. But all of the things that are common across games, players, hands, decks, etc. You don't have a deck, but you get what I mean. Though that terminology I've kept the same. And I think that's the problem that Netrunner had, right? Was that they came into it and they took those fundamental things, and they called the player the corp. And they called, your deck R&D, the runner and all of that. And so it was really flavorful and really cool, but it made it harder to grok because you had to relearn fundamental concepts rather than learning new ones. Anyway,
they had to have a huge glossary as well, I think.
Yeah.
So how much time do you have left, Sarah, so we can try to make sure that we make
like 10 minutes?
All right, so we have 10 minutes.
All right.
So
speed run.
Are we going to say something nice about the game now? Because I feel like we should.
Yeah, go ahead. Actually,
pay
pittance. You have to pay pittance for the bad stuff you said. Go ahead and do.
No, I mean, I really like the game. I really enjoy it. I guess
she was scoring it like a 9. You were talking about putting it a 9 on your scale, and I was like, wow, that's really impressive.
I think I originally scored it 8, and then I thought to myself, it made me have an epiphany actually, because I was like, well, I am trying to make this game, like I'm trying to approach this game like as a Euro player. Obviously, it's not like 100%. I've told you this before. It's not 100% my kind of thing in terms of area control. I don't usually go out of my way to play area control, and like games that have battling and stuff like that, generally not, right? But Eclipse is up there. Yeah, Eclipse is up. So I tried to approach it like I approach
Night and
Mage Knight.
But you mean more like player to player battling? Yeah.
I just wanted to approach it like just step back from like what is my favorite games usually, and think of it more as just someone who likes area control. And then I was like, no, I'm going to put it up there because in terms of area control, I think it just ticks all of the boxes. It does. Like you can go down many different paths. The factions or intelligences, are all really different. They're all very balanced too, it seems. Like obviously I need to play it more, but I feel like that part is just like you've nailed it, I think. They're very different. They've got all different cool powers. But yet also the action, it's not that hard to learn because the actions are kind of the same. Like you've still got basic actions that are kind of the same, but people can do all these, like different intelligences can do all these different things.
Yeah, fundamentally.
And that part was fun.
Yeah, I've tried to make it so that they all have a common language, right? So that like I think I often bring up certain asymmetric games as an example, like where it just feels really hard because you don't understand anything that the opponent is doing, right? You're like, they're playing an entirely different game to you, and that can be really hard. So I've tried to make it so that all of the factions pretty much have the same base actions. They have the same iconography. They have one fully unique function. And then they have their abilities, which are different. But other than that, like you after having played one faction, you can pick up any other faction and you can understand 90% of what they do, and then so the extra 10% that you have to learn.
You know what else I thought was genius? The fact that you put, and I think you said you changed the icons though, but on the icons you put a star if it was that it's the star value of the bots that you need to look at, not the strength.
That part
was
good.
Cool.
Yeah, I haven't changed that, right?
Okay.
The thing that I changed was around the sniping and the stunning thing, because that's the one that uses both, right? It's like you use your size but you affect their strength.
Yeah.
And that the only thing I changed on that was I just added a versus strength on the end, but the icon itself still has the star in it. Again, that's what I tried to make really easy, right? I tried to make the iconography as intuitive as possible so that anytime you were using size, the star, it's present in the icon. So you don't have to always ask, like, which one is it? Is it strength? Is it size? It's size when you see the icon.
Yeah, it's clever. And also the battling is just wacky. And I love that.
I'm glad.
It's very different.
Yeah, the battling is really, really cool. It's like, I would say this game is way, on one hand, I get thrown out of it because I don't do dudes on a map, usually. Mm-hmm. But, I'm like big time into dominant species, so it's really weird. So I would say that it is way deeper than I ever expected as I'm playing. I'm like, wow, this feels like what I want to play if I'm going to play dudes on a map. Definitely. And I like that the combat isn't like just straightforward, really easy to understand. That was
it's definitely not.
That is like the hardest part, I think, to wrap your head around, because like you instinctively want to go fight and say, I want to fight them. And you already, all that's kind of delayed unless you have experience with the game and kind of.
Yeah, there's all these limitations.
Yeah, there's all these limitations, and you don't necessarily have to go down that route. You have all these other things you can do, and there's always options. But it's hard to see them because it's just, I don't know, it's opaque for something that's not that opaque, which is really interesting.
It's something, I agree that it's interesting in the sense that as a designer, one of the things that's always a big surprise to me, because again, I mean, I understand, I know my game very well, but on the surface, I always think it's pretty straightforward. You want to control areas, you want to kill bots. Like those two things give you points, right? And you want to collect artifacts, right? Artifacts, control areas, kill bots. Those things generally give you points. But I'm really surprised by the number of players who, when I play test it, they often really struggle in the first game to work out what they're actually trying to do, which is why in the rulebook I've put, I think on the back of it, I don't have one right in front of me, but one of the FAQ questions was, I don't seem to score points. What am I doing wrong? And so I had to put a whole section about what you're actually trying to do to win the game generally. But yeah, I think the pathways to victory are very varied, even though the actual scoring mechanics are fairly, I think, reasonably straightforward.
Well, you just mentioned something about the rulebook, and like what we should have done is got the picture of the idealized Kenny and put that on your
anime me.
Yeah, the anime version of you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I thought it was fun.
I was
kind of it. Yeah, I was kind of inspired by. I really like Vlada's rulebooks. Mm-hmm. And so I liked. Dungeon Lords is always one that I think of, where he's got the little imps that come up on the side and go like, this is how you play the game, and some like little flavor thing.
And like humor, usually uses humor.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's little sprinkles of humor. Humor is really risky, right? Because you don't want to come across as a moron, right? Nothing will turn someone off your game as much as a flat joke.
Yeah, this person's trying to be funny.
Yeah. Like, get it? But there was one part in the rulebook where I said, remember, when you're sniping, you use your size, but you affect their strength. And I'm like, you can blame the designer for this.
That's
or
right.
that kind of thing. But yeah, I've tried to make it fairly like tongue-in-cheek. And also just as an opportunity, it's generic enough that I can use it in multiple rulebooks. But it's just an opportunity for me to insert a little bit of my personality into it. And kind of almost, make the author more visible in that sense. Like, a lot of the time when you play a game, at least when I talk to a lot of people, they actually don't know who the designer is.
Yeah, right? There's no personal touch.
Yeah, there's no personal touch. So I've tried to make it as personal as possible. I'm not trying to be like, hey, can I hang out in all of your gaming sessions? But it's enough to remember me.
you kind of did this Wizard of Oz thing where you're behind the image. So you should change like all your profiles, everything to that image, so that nobody knows who you really are.
Yeah. That's right. Well, I mean, when I'm currently working on more of that kind of media presence and that kind of thing. So it is quite likely that I will do that. I have like a few.
We see the transformation.
That's right. I slowly become anime me. But yeah, no, I'm glad that you liked that, and it wasn't like what is going on.
I think we kind of got a little bit sad that you need to actually put hints in the thing, like, because it just kind of it brought up the conversation about how many times do people really play games, and do they need to be given all these hints because they're actually not going to play a game enough to figure this out themselves.
So that's true, right? I think the key thing though is that, in my opinion, you want to onboard people enough that they get to see in the first game the really fun stuff, right? Like if they're spending the whole first game just trying to piece stuff together, and then they don't enjoy that whole process of piecing it together, then they don't ever get to the point where they get to see that unique stuff. Kind of like what you're saying, right?
Well,
so I figure that
instead of onboard, you should waterboard. Waterboard.
Torturing them with my hints and humor.
Right, there you go.
But yeah, it's more just so like, look, I'm someone who generally when I read a rule book, if I see hints, I'll go, I'll get it. Like, I'm happy to play this game enough where I like to think that if I play a game the first time, even if I don't do well or even if I don't get it, I can generally see the value of the game if it's there. So then I kind of want to explore it more and see more interesting stuff. But I know that some people like to play really broadly. So I'd rather for those people who may not play Scrap more than, say, twice or even once, right? They may just play once and go, that was cool. And then onto the shelf it goes with the 50 other games. I want them to be able to, from the first game, start to engage with interesting and cool stuff and strategize a little bit more. Because I think the strategizing is what's interesting in Scrap, right? It's getting the sequencing. It's getting what you're trying to achieve. It's understanding that you can aim for these things. And it's understanding that you can use certain powers in certain interesting ways. So that's why I hinted there.
Who's this imaginary person that only has 50 games? I've never seen that.
Oh, so no. 50 games that are on the unplayed shelf.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Is what I meant.
That makes sense.
That's a more standard person.
All right, so I guess we're probably on the way out. Anybody want to say anything except for come and buy the game? Please buy the game. Buy the game.
No, it's just thanks so much for having me on. It was really fun.
That was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you both got the chance to play and actually really did enjoy Scrap because I mean ultimately that's what I'm making the game for, right? Is for people to have fun with it. So it's always really nice. I always get a little warm inside whenever anyone says, I played Scrap and this was cool, or like I checked out the art and it was nice. Like those little comments go a surprisingly long way.
Oh no, Ian joined right at the end. Oh no.
Oh no, Ian, we're about to go.
Oh no.
I'm sorry, Ian.
I thought the reason for making the game was to become a billionaire. I'm very sad that it was to get warm in the heart. That makes sense.
To get warm.
Yeah. Well, look, I can warm my heart with money.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
But no, legitimately, I do like it when someone just says anything nice about the game.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, I'll say something nice. I think that people that play a lot of Dudes on a Map games are going to find something different with Scrap.
Yeah, I hope so.
And the people that are their roommates, like my roommate would love that game, and I would gladly play this with him because I don't really play Dudes on the Map, but this is really good for a Euro player. It's got a lot of good Euro stuff in it, definitely.
Yeah. That's the thing I'm really trying to get across with it as well, not to take up too much extra time. But like, so many of the people who have play tested the game are people who come in and they go, just to let you know, like, I don't really like area control. Like, I'm like, okay, what games do you usually like? I like midweight Euros or heavy Euros and stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. And they've become my favorite people to show Scrap to because so many times they come out the other end and they're like, the best mechanic in this game is the battle system. Like, it's so cool. Or like, cool. I love all the tech stuff. Like, it's not an area control game or all of this stuff. It's really, it is an area control game. Like, it's a prominent mechanism in the game, but it's not the only thing in the game, right? There's so much more to do.
Before we go though, do you get scared that you're going to be like somewhere in the middle? That you're going to be
we kind of talked about this the other day because I was starting to, put out ads and stuff. and I was trying to think about how to actually brand Scrap, right? And by brand it, I more mean, how do I make it so that people actually click and at least check out the game, right? I don't care, once they've looked at it, if they decide, it's not for me, that's fine. But how do I get them to overcome that initial hurdle? Because I was talking about it with some of the barbecue people, and I'm really hesitant to use area control in the description of like the initial thing, because so many people will see area control and then go, nah. But it's the thing that I've kind of found through all of the playtesting is that Scrap is actually the game for those people. It's for those people who don't like area control games, because it has so much more than that. So even though it is an area control game, I almost don't want to use it in its thing, because it might turn people off who might otherwise love the game. So I'm hoping that it doesn't end up in that weird middle where it doesn't really commit. I mean, I own that it's an area control game. It is. It's an asymmetric area control game, and interaction is key. You're going to punch people, you're going to get into combat, and it's going to happen. But, you know, it's got more than that as well. So I'm hoping that really comes across.
And we've got Ian who snuck something in right there at the end. There he goes.
There we go. Hybrid games are tough to market. We had a lot of trouble with the messaging around Voidfall. We came close to just writing, this is not like Twilight Imperium on the campaign.
Yeah.
Straight to the point. Just
that's actually why. So that's actually kind of why as well. Like, I actually used Mitch's comment. So Mitch, also from the Board Game BBQ, his comment has, I'm not usually a fan of area control, but in it, because I think that comment is really important to show, hey, I'm not an area control fan, but this game was pretty awesome. And yeah, I agree with Ian. Those hybrid games are really tricky because, again, it's not that I'm not trying to appeal to both worlds, right? I made Scrap to be a game that I really liked and really enjoyed, and to fix problems that I felt existed in area control. I didn't set out to make a game that heavy Eurogamers would love. That kind of happened by accident. But
you
now
should
that
just
it has
do that,
happened,
KP. Fixes problems that are found in area control.
I mean, I want to write an article. I've got a title in my head where I want to write how I accidentally designed a heavy Euro game.
There you go.
Because that is kind of what Scrap has been designed as. It is actually a heavy Euro game that just happens to have a battle mechanism in it. But it's very, I don't know, it's very different. I know that comes across as like, oh, it's a new thing. No one's ever done this game before. But it's not like that. It's just, it is kind of hard to quantify. I don't think it's Ameritrash. Not that that's a very descriptive label. You know, there's no dice chucking or anything like that. But if I go to describe it as a Euro, people are like, where are the cows? Where's the
Where
wheat
are the sheep
stuff?
I can slaughter?
Yeah. It's very, very different. It's just like in Scrap, your resources are your bots and your energy. That's like your cows and stuff. And then you just use those to harvest goods from the planet. And it's just competitive in that way.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think we probably.
Good luck with that.
There.
I have no.
Good luck with it.
I have
good luck with that.
I don't have any marketing advice for you.
No.
Well, good luck with all of that.
Yeah, no, all good. I think what I'm hoping for is just that people see that authentically I have tried to make a really interesting game, and I'm hoping that I can communicate that effectively. And yeah, we'll just
100%.
The rest is history.
Yeah,
100%. Robot cows. Yeah. That's what Ian said.
Robot cows. That's
and
right.
I love the fact, Mo, I love the fact that you were like, oh, well, I might play this with Lyndon, but you didn't say you'd play with me.
No, not with you.
Oh, sad.
You
already know the rules. I don't play games you already. I don't play games you don't know the rules to. All right, guys. I guess I'm going to turn this thing off. It was great having you. Maybe we'll do this again. Hopefully, again.
Yeah, soon. Absolutely.
Hopefully, right. Next time, hopefully, I won't blink in and out. That was weird. But thanks for coming, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
And thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Let me see if I can figure out how to turn this damn thing off.